Hey, there we go. We're live. Hello, Randy.
Well, Megan, how the heck are you?
I'm doing great. How about you?
I always say every day's a good day on the right side of the grass. I'm on the
That is
right side of the
true.
grass.
I agree with you. I'm having a great day. It was beautiful weather today. I got a lot done. I had some good meetings. It was, it was a good day. So I'm so grateful to be here with you again. I love our conversations. Our last conversation was about Disney. And we just finished the episode where you talked about your time as a Disney detective. So, someone in the chat was asking, who is the Disney detective? Well, it's Randy Watts, everyone.
Durr.
So, can you remind us what years you worked for the Walt Disney Corporation?
Yeah, I went on vacation to Walt Disney World in 1990, and instead of going to the parks, we saw this castle building and saw that it was the casting center. So my wife and I, just for chuckles and grins, popped into the casting center, and they ended up interviewing us that day, and we both walked out with employment. And I walked out with full-time employment, which they didn't even do at the time. But he felt like maybe my qualifications, he made an exception and hired me as a full-time
Well, that's
person.
amazing. Yeah, and then you worked your way all the way up from being just a what did they call you right at the beginning? It wasn't quite a detective yet.
No, no, I was just a security guy. It's like a quasi police department. I had a police car and uniform, but I was in uniform and patrolled the whole property, or I may be assigned to one particular park. But yeah, I had to do that for 6 months while I learned all of the ins and outs and every gate and every opening and anything that might go wrong. I had to study and learn. And 6 months to the day, I went into the investigations office and I said, "Look, I've done what you've asked. I'm ready to become a detective, i.e., comma investigator." They soften up their language a little for everything.
Right. They want it to sound, a little more Disney. I think that's
Exactly.
the adjective.
Yep. Yeah.
And then you worked your
Employees.
way all the way up to a resort manager.
Well, I did. I was actually the first. And this is not. I'm not bragging because it's not that important. But I was the first individual to ever go from my position right into resort management. And they put me through Disney University in the hospitality area and taught me the ins and outs, and you know threw me in.
That's amazing. So, I noticed after we did our episode, now I should have done this before we did our interview, but after our interview, I talked to my daughter, who is a Disney person, and I talked to my son, who is a conspiracy theorist. Um, he loves to research conspiracy theories. And it turns out that I fell short and I did not ask you the questions that they would have wanted me to ask you. And so I went and did some research and found the top questions that people want to know from Disney. And we actually hit the majority of them. You'll be interested to know the ones that people want to know the most about are about the utilidors, the underground tunnels. People want to know what's inside Cinderella's castle suite. They want to know about the abandoned and hidden areas. And that's one of the things we didn't quite get into enough, but maybe you can talk about that. They want to know the truth behind the no death policy, the hidden Mickeys, Club 33, which we talked about, the smellitizers. Is that what you called it?
The Smellitzers.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Smellitzers. And then the other thing we didn't really touch on is what happens to lost items. So those were the top things that people wanted to know about. Do you have any more comments about something maybe we didn't cover in the episode?
Well, I'm actually truly surprised that one of the questions wasn't, is Walt Disney frozen? in a
Well, that's definitely one of the conspiracy theories that's out there. From what I understand, that's been debunked, or do you have more information about that?
no, he is not frozen. He's
Okay.
buried. Yeah. And
And he was cremated, wasn't he?
he was, well, I don't know that answer.
Okay.
I
So
just
I did a little bit of research. I think that what I came up with is that he was cremated, and when I told that to my son who enjoys conspiracy theories, he said, "Well, how do you know? They might have just cremated his body and frozen his head."
there are people that have done that. Um, uh, in the cryo world, I know that there are several heads that are preserved and frozen, but that certainly isn't an expert. I'm certainly not an expert in that. Um, I can I can tell you all about funerals and body preparation because I worked in the funeral industry for a while. But yeah, I don't know anything about the science of cryo. What is it? Something
Cryogenics.
cryogenetics.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
that's a rabbit hole for another time. We'll talk to you about your funeral industry experience probably in another episode. But for tonight, we're going to stick with Disney. We're going to stick with Q&A from our live audience here. So if anybody in the chat has some questions for Randy, I would love to hear them. I'm sure Randy will do his best to answer them. But for now, let's get back to just a couple of things that we didn't talk about in this episode because I just didn't know to ask.
Okay.
But a couple of people have asked me about abandoned projects like Discovery Island and River Country, which was a water park, wasn't it? I don't know if you know anything about that.
Well, I do know that they modify them into different themes and different rides. Like Space Mountain, um, and the Matterhorn in California. They have changed up the themes and they've become different rides. I have to tell you, well, I want to tell you one quick thing about Tinkerbell
Okay.
because it's kind of a fun experience. But, every night uh, at 10 o'clock before the fireworks, the first thing that happens is the park just goes dark. The lights go down, and all of a sudden you hear the music and the twinkling and the uh, the great big what are they, spires on the castle.
Hmm.
They start twinkling and people look up because it grabs their attention, and Tinkerbell comes from the very tip top of that castle and flies down with her magic wand and goes away. And then the music is all, it's really cool. It's a neat experience. And the music starts and the fireworks go off. I was assigned because they always have to have someone present when Tinkerbell prepares for her flight. And so I went backstage before she had gotten her outfit on. And she's just a tiny little thing. And her mother was Tinkerbell and her grandmother was Tinkerbell.
Oh, wow.
So
What a
it runs
legacy.
in the family. Yeah.
Hmm.
It's just a tiny little thing. But they put all of this material on her and these tight vests and things. And, to make sure it's 100% safe. And then they dress her in her Tinkerbell costume, and she goes up onto the roof. This is while it's dark. She goes up onto the roof. There's a ladder, and there's a line that she's hooked up to, and it pulls her up to the very tip top of the castle. But no one sees that because it's dark and no one's paying attention in the dark. If they looked closely, they would see her being pulled up on this zip line. And
Hmm.
then when the music starts and everything happens, the zip line is released and it's controlled speed, but she comes down from the castle doing her wand and all the sparkly lights and everything. And she lands on the top of one of the buildings, but she goes out of sight so you can't see her land. But she lands on the same top of the building that she took off from and
Okay.
climbs down, and all the layers come off, and she gets paid an incredible amount of money to
Oh,
do that
really?
on a nightly basis. Yeah,
Hmm.
yeah, very wealthy. I wanted to be Tinker
Wow.
Bell, but for some reason, they didn't think I would make a good one.
I don't know why.
It well,
You've
it
got the right color of glasses for sure.
Oh, yeah. Well, it could be that I weighed 310 pounds at the time. So that's one reason.
That could
Fortunately,
be part of it, yeah.
a lot of that's gone now, but yeah. And I was gonna tell you another little experience that I forgot to tell you last time. When I was sent to Europe to open the Euro Disney project, now Disneyland Paris, um, it was just being built. So, I mean, there were so many things that hadn't even been constructed yet. And my assignment was just to walk the property, get to know it, every little inch of the property and the fencing and stuff. And there was this big, like a mound with a cave in it. And I was so curious, so I walked in and here's this huge dragon laying there. And I thought, wow, that's incredible. They make it look so realistic. I didn't know what the attraction was going to be, but I just know that this dragon was laying there and it was enormous. And then I noticed that it was breathing. And I'm like, oh, that makes it look so realistic. And all of a sudden, the eyes pop open on this dragon and it flings its head. And it was in chains, and all the chains snapped and broke. And it threw its neck around and looked right at me, and fire came billowing out and the loudest roar. And I hope nobody was watching because I came running out of that thing so fast. I was scared to death. Um, I should have been wearing diapers at the time because it threw me off. But the Imagineers do that kind of stuff. I was walking at Epcot Center one time when I was in
Well, wait,
uniform
wait,
for
wait,
that.
wait, wait.
Oh,
What was it?
it
It a
was
re it was an attraction or what
It
was it?
yeah, it was called the Dragon's Lair, and it
Oh,
had just
wow.
been, they were building it from the inside out. So the inside was complete, and it looked just like the inside of a real cave, and the chains that snap and everything, that really adds to the effect because
Yeah.
it had a huge metal collar thing on its neck and on its feet, and there were skeletons, human bones laying all over the place. So it put you in the mood right away that you're going to be killed and eaten. But man, when it snaps those chains and comes at you and that fire comes out, it made me weak in the knees, to be sure.
So you were afraid for your life, really, but it was an attraction, it just wasn't finished yet, and you just stumbled upon it?
Yeah, because that's what I
Wow.
was doing. I was
Yeah.
looking at everything. I had
Wow.
uh, I had a similar experience at Epcot Center when I was in uniform. Um, there was, they have the different pavilions, and one of them is all about the human body.
Mhm.
And within that pavilion, there's this little guy that controls the brain. And it's a theater that you sit in, and he does this whole show about the different parts of the brain. And, his robotics are amazing. He comes to life and everything. Well, I started out on the midnight shift. And so my my duties there as I learned the property was to go and uh, put a key in all these different attractions that, hey, I've been there, all looks well. And I was, I'll admit I was it was a little spooky because I didn't think there was anyone else in the pavilion. And I was walking through that theater, and all of a sudden that little guy that controls your brain came to life, and his chair swung around and he says, "Howdy." Once again, I almost had to give myself CPR. um, I bolted out of there so fast, and I heard laughter, and it was those dang Imagineers that were working on the robotics. They love to do stuff like that.
Yeah, so they surprised you on purpose so that they could get a little laugh?
Yeah, they got a kick out
Mm.
of that. And
Yeah.
then and then within a couple of weeks, I was at the sea, the pavilion all about the oceans, the seas, the sea life. They have aquariums and everything. And I had to, one of my responsibilities was to go into the medical autopsy area for the sea life when they have to operate on them. And they had these dolphins swimming around in a pool inside there. And I'm like, oh, those are so cute, you know? And there were balls floating on the water that they would play with. So I went over and I took one of the balls and I said, hey, hey. And one of the dolphins swam up to me and I was going to toss the ball. And that thing, you think of dolphins, I always think of Flipper, so friendly. That
Yeah.
thing came up out of the water and the mouth opened, and I thought I was going to lose my hand. So, yeah, there's all these little surprises I had, which kind of threw me, in the beginning. And I'm
Yeah.
sorry if I got off track because,
No, that's okay, that's okay.
yeah.
I love hearing all of these little secret things, and I'm sure our audience does too. We all, I don't know, lots of people have been to Disney, but, these little secret, stories and everything, things that people don't really know, and so this is the only place to get them, right? Behind the scenes from someone who actually worked there.
One of the funnest things that I used to like to take my family on, at night we'd go and I could get in 24 hours a day, and I'd drive in and um, I'd just hop into I had an unmarked police car with the spotlights and everything, and I'd get into the car and get the kids in there and I'd drive back into the preserve area. Do you remember last time we spoke, I told you that gators end up in the pool all the time and in the ponds and things where the public is, and they have to capture the gators using their marshmallow
Yeah.
luring, get them in a
Right.
cage, and they release them in Disney's preserve because they don't want to hurt any wildlife.
Yeah.
So there's a river back there, or a big river-like pond actually, that is just chucked full of alligators.
Wow.
And so I drive, there was a little bridge that went over it, and then I take my flashlight and shine it, and gators' eyes glow bright red. So then it
Mm.
was fun. My kids used to love seeing when I put the spotlight across all these bright red, looked like bright lit up marbles or lights. And then the gators would start barking. They bark like dogs, kind of. It's a very eerie sound unless you're safe in your car on a bridge.
Right.
but
I can imagine.
but no one knows about that area. Uh, it's a really neat preserve. Also, all of the trees at Disney, they're beautiful and they're in perfect condition. And people have asked me so many times, how on earth do they keep all these trees so perfect? There's never any, there's lightning all the time in Florida. I was walking in the studios, it was during the day, and they had a thunderstorm come up, and a bolt of lightning hit one of the palm trees and just fried it. And there are these
Oh,
really
wow.
tall palm trees like in Hollywood.
Mhm.
But what's really neat is the Disney nursery, for every tree they have on property, no matter what park or resort, they have 5 other trees in this nursery that are ready to go in the event that there's a car accident that wipes some out or lightning. So by the next morning, that palm tree was replaced with another huge tall palm tree, and there was just absolutely no sign that one of them had been damaged. And that's back in the area where people can't see, but it's really an interesting tour to go through that nursery and see every plant and all the what do they call them, topiaries that are carved like Mickey and Minnie, and
Yeah.
all these bushes that they're all replaceable in just a number of hours.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's actually one of the things that one of my people asked me about is the nature preserve. Um, they seemed to believe that there was some place inside the animal kingdom that was kind of secreted away from everyone that was intended to be a nature preserve and then kind of didn't really. I don't know, is that where the gators are, or is there another
It,
location?
it's separate and it's away from the
Okay.
public. Yeah,
Okay.
it's completely away from the public. But and I have to say that I'm not familiar with the animal kingdom because I was there when they were building it, but I never actually got to go through it, and I need to go back
Okay.
sometime. Yeah.
Yeah, that was one of the things that I actually really loved the most when I went. A few times I took students, high school students, to a Disney vacation. In fact, it's about to be spring break over here. I don't know about where you are, but every other year as a choir teacher, I would give up half of my spring break so that I could take students on a trip somewhere. And we
Wow.
went to Disney 4 times, San Francisco once, and New York City once, and that was the extent of it. The kids always wanted to go to Disney World.
Oh
Um
man, I wish I was in your choir.
Yeah, so we would leave school usually the Friday before spring break, and we would go Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, and then fly back on Tuesday. And we tried to
Oh
do
man.
1 park per day. So it was a whirlwind trip. We always tried to keep the kids as worn out as possible. I think we did anywhere from 15 to 20 miles of walking every single day that we were there, just to wear them out so they wouldn't get into mischief in the nighttime. But, I loved the animal kingdom, and one of my favorites was the safari excursion. So you would get in these Jeeps, pretty large Jeeps. They would hold 12 to 15 people, and you would go around this little safari, and what amazed me is that from the Jeep, it looked like there were no fences and no enclosures, and you were looking at things like cheetahs and leopards and lions and, things like that. But it looked like they weren't contained in any way. So it sort of gave this illusion that they could kind of come up to the Jeep at any time they wanted to. It was a little bit scary, but I'm sure that they had invisible fencing, probably electric fencing in there somewhere to keep people safe.
Yeah, they're pretty clever with that stuff, and yeah, people are incredibly safe there.
Yeah, the
Unless
Imagineers do a good job.
yeah. Yeah, unless people do something, you know, stupid,
Right, right.
people
And
stay
then
safe.
right. There are rules for a reason. And this is kind of what I was talking about in the chat with the other video is that, it people don't generally get harmed unless they're breaking a rule of some kind. Although there are, of course, exceptions to that. But one of the other questions that I got was about the secret room above the firehouse. Do you know anything about that?
I am sorry, I just don't know what they're talking about. Um,
Okay.
at Walt
Um,
Disney World?
Yeah, so this was a viewer who saw that I had posted that I was doing this interview today, and they said there's a quote unquote secret room above the firehouse near Main Street, which was supposed to be Walt's planned hideaway, which piqued my interest. People want to know if it's still in use or just a time capsule.
Well,
So
Walt's hideaway was in the castle,
the
uh,
Cinderella Castle.
Cinderella's castle. His beautiful apartment up there for that he had built for him and his wife.
Hmm.
Um, he passed away before he could live there, but that was his intention to actually be able to live up in the castle when he was in Florida. And yeah, beautiful, perfect, and the view of everything is awesome.
Yeah, I bet
That's
amazing.
the hideaway I know about, and we had certain areas that would take celebrities when we wanted to watch the parade. We'd get up on the roofs and things, and
Yeah, to be away.
yeah, and then when we had the vice president and the president, which is frequent, it's like every vice president and every president visits Walt Disney World. Secret Service comes 3 days before the president arrives, and all of the covers of the manholes in the streets in Orlando are all welded shut. And all
Oh,
around Disney property, the manholes around the property are welded shut. And we were assigned to be up on the roof with one of the Secret Service agents, and they would go up. Each roof had a Secret Service agent on it to watch everywhere the president went, and they would have these strange. They were weapons, they were guns, but they were so strange. They looked like square black boxes
Hmm.
with a scope coming out, and it had laser systems and everything on it, and it was so intriguing to be up on the roof and watch these guns track the president. So yeah, if you happen to become president, Megan, you'll be safe when you get to Walt Disney World for sure.
Well, I think I'm pretty much unelectable, but I appreciate the support. So, one of the other questions, well, so first of all, Tim asked, how does Tinkerbell, I think he's referring to Tinkerbell, how does she start and end on the same building? I'm assuming it's something to do with the zip line and a pulley system. Can you
Yeah.
explain more about that?
You bet. It kind of reminds me of a big heavy duty clothesline. You know how when people live in high rise buildings, they'll have clotheslines that jut out and they can pull the line and it will put the clothes out. And then they pull the other end and it brings them back. So
Mhm.
when in the dark, when she's going uphill, it's motorized and it's taking her up all the way up to the top of the castle.
Got
Then
it.
then it's released and she's coming downhill and lands right there on the building too. It's
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah, it's not like a free fall for her. It's all motorized, but yeah, yeah, and
Yeah,
she ends up where she starts.
yeah.
And something interesting about the fireworks at Disney. When I was in uniform, we always had to have someone stationed in the area right underneath where the fireworks went off. Now it looks like they're going off right over the castle, but that's an illusion. It's They're actually going off back behind the castle, and there's a large grass field. And when the sergeant took me and dropped me off, he said that little shed out there, shed, SHED, is it protection for you? And I said, wait, protection for what? He goes, you'll see. He says, you just stay under there during the fireworks. And if you see anything burning or breaking out into a fire, you know, call on the radio. And he said, oh, here's a hard hat. I'm like, a hard hat? He said, trust me, just put it on. So I put on this hard hat and I went and stood under this little tiny shed. I mean, it's like a little shed that you'd have a barbecue grill under. No walls or anything, just on stilts. And when those fireworks started, it was like I was in some kind of a war. All of the burning shrapnel would hit the ground and they were just pounding down on this tin roof of this shed. And it's funny because you think of the fireworks and you don't even think about where do they all go. Well, they go
Yeah.
in this grass area. It's really large and it's just boom, boom, little bombs hitting everywhere and shrapnel slamming down on the shed. And I could see why I needed a hard hat just in case I had to run out or something. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's kind of an unseen thing about Disney is the fireworks.
Yeah, I bet that was an experience.
Oh, yeah.
One of the other questions that I got was about the lost and found. Um, Somebody mentioned that there were probably a huge amount of very odd items in the lost and found and wanted to know how long they're kept and what's done with them if nobody claims them. Do you know anything about that?
I do know all about the lost and found for both items and children.
Oh,
There's because there's so many kids that get separated from their mom and dad. They actually
sure.
have a station for that for lost and found kids. If someone finds a
Mhm.
child, they are directed, they ask anybody and they'll direct them right to this area where they have toys and food and juice and everything to entertain the kids and Disney movies going until their mom and dad, who will also ask an employee, I've lost my kid, what do I do? And they're like,
Mm.
that's no problem. And they radio and say the parents are here at such and such, and so the parents and the children are reunited. As far as items go, yes, there are a ton of things found that some of it's illegal contraband, and that's turned over to investigations. What
Mhm.
isn't illegal is all turned into a very large lost and found central area up towards the front of the Magic Kingdom. So that if someone comes asking if by any chance anyone found a wallet or a phone or camera and tons of cameras,
I'm
um,
sure.
they 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 can describe it and claim it. There are lockers in the Magic Kingdom that are underneath the train station, and it's just an entire wall of lockers, and they're always packed full. Everyone who has cameras or something they don't want to carry around, they can turn things into there. If no one claims the lost and found after a certain period of time, they're donated to charity. And
Okay.
yeah, I think if I'm not mistaken, I think it's 3 months they keep it. It
Okay.
I think that's what it was. That's I'm trying to stretch my brain back that far. Mhm.
Do you happen to remember anything particularly odd that turned up in the lost and found that you were called attention to?
Most of the odd things were uh, like bags of weed, um, crack pipes, and things that you just wouldn't expect to find at the Magic Kingdom.
Right.
Um, there was there was one particular time where someone turned in a pair of underwear that wasn't particularly clean, but
Oh,
I I had to wonder, as did all of my coworkers, how? What the heck? How is this laying on the ground, you know, at Disney? That
and
was
yes, and also, what would be the point of turning that in as a lost item? One would think that you would just leave it laying where you found it.
I I don't think they kept that for 3 months. I think that went right into the garbage.
Let's hope not. Oh my
Yeah,
goodness.
and, anything that was illegal, like I said, any, drug paraphernalia, uh, would be turned into us in investigations, and we would just hope that the person would come to claim it, but
Yeah,
they never did, but,
yeah,
because if they had come, of course, that they would have consequences for bringing that into the park.
right. Yeah, definitely.
We
Um,
would have people wearing clothing items that should never be in the park. Some very offensive clothes that, with the F word on it, or, and I think I covered the immodest clothing last time, where someone would wear a completely sheer shirt or something. And, anytime that happens, we would approach them and let them know that they need to change. And if they said they didn't have a shirt, and they couldn't get one, we would tell them to either buy one at the gift shop, and if they contested, we would give them a very cheap Disney shirt that, you know, a T-shirt that would cover the essentials or cover their. I'd tell the kids that had the, nasty things on their shirt that they just needed to turn them inside out.
yeah,
So,
yeah, interesting.
yeah.
Well, another one of the questions that I got was about the hidden Mickeys. And I personally, I mean, at least from what I know, um, Disney kind of keeps it secret as to how many there are. But do you
Mhm.
happen to know the exact number? I mean, you
Nope.
don't have to say.
There are hundreds. They call them Easter eggs,
Right.
and they want people to find them. And I think I mentioned you go down some of the water slides, and there will be a Mickey at some point in that big tube you're going down, or they'll have big, huge paintings, and Mickey will have. If you looked really carefully, you'll see the different characters. Even though you'd really have to strain to see them.
Yeah.
Disney collects things that have the Mickey shape as well. Like every year, there's a cow that becomes the official Disney cow because it has a Mickey Mouse head and ears. It just happens to grow like that. And so there's always, the cow that's awarded the Disney cow, and any animals or pets that happen to have something in the shape of Mickey, they Disney will either buy it or come photograph it. And
Oh,
yeah, yeah, that's kind of fun. And then we'd have the Super Bowl winner quarterback who, after the Super Bowl, they'd come up and say, "You've just won Super Bowl 49. Now what do you do?" And of course, they're
I'm going to
instructed to say,
Disney.
"I'm going to Walt Disney World."
Yeah, and what's the compensation for that? Do they get free passes? Is it money? What do they do?
They get, yeah, free everything. Yeah, they're
Okay,
very
gotcha.
treated very VIP, as are several of the dignitaries.
Okay. So
Yeah.
that let that be a lesson to you, people. If you are ever a Super Bowl winning quarterback, make sure that you cash in on your Disney prize. I actually remember when they started doing that. It was sometime when I was a teenager, I think. I'm not going to date myself. But I remember it wasn't just the Super Bowl. It wasn't just the quarterback at the Super Bowl, but it was Olympians when they would win their gold medal. They had a whole ad campaign at one point, and I think it was maybe the early 90s, early to mid 90s, where it was, any of these national heroes, people who won something, they would say, "I'm going to Disney."
Yeah, there's special nights that they have at Disney. Um, Grad nights for graduation. They'll go all night with the park open so that the graduates can spend the entire night celebrating and having fun at Disney. There's actually a few of those around graduation time. There's also one night that's just especially for gay people, the gay folks. They call it Red Shirt Day,
Okay.
and then they'd all wear red shirts and just have a blast, and they'd feel comfortable. And this was back a ways when they might feel otherwise uncomfortable with their significant other, and they just had a blast. And they were very, very, that with all these groups. Grad night was tough. This night for the gay folks was always, they were just so kind and followed the rules, and they were exemplary. You know who wasn't exemplary was, and I hate to even say this, but the Christian night that they'd have, where Christians come from all over the United States. And that's where we had the most problems, because I think they're getting
Wow.
away and sneaking alcohol in and just going nuts.
So, what did you have to do to get in on Christian night? Did you just have to profess? Did you have to wear a cross? What were the requirements for that?
Y- I guess there was no requirement. They didn't have to show any Christian card or anything. They just, it's just that's when they went, because the park was open all night. When we have these special groups, we would have to leave the park open so that the public, once the last person left, and that was a coveted position for the last person. Everyone wanted to be the last person out. And
Right.
we would each have an area that we would have to cover as the park closed, and we just bring kind of herd the crowd in. You'd look in some of the attractions, because people would try to hide so that they're
Right.
the very last person out. And yeah, they always tried to be the last one. But once everybody was out of the park, there was a quick cleanup, and everything starts up again, and the special groups are let in. They have one for the employees that was just amazing. And I told you, they treat the employees like gold.
Yeah.
The,
Yeah.
the,
So,
gr-
when it I wanted to ask you, when it's employee night, obviously somebody has to be manning the rides, right? So, did you guys go in shifts, or, how did that work?
well, I was fortunate enough to, be in a position where, whether I was working or not, I was at the park. And yeah, we'd take shifts. The characters, the shopkeepers, all of those, they'd get off halfway through their shift and someone would come on for them so that they could cover. And it was so fun. They didn't care because it's all employees coming in with their families, and it's just a good time. It's almost like they don't have to, you know, they don't have to be in character the entire time. They can loosen up a little bit.
Right,
But
right.
it was really special that they would celebrate their employees like that. The
Yeah.
dressing room for I opened the huge resort, the sports resort, um, and it's themed with sports, and it's got, I think it was 3,500 rooms. It's
Wow.
enormous, and they have these giant sports icons. Maybe you've seen them, like a cheerleader's megaphone. It's huge, and there's a stairwell inside of it, or they'll have a baseball bat that would have a stairwell inside of it, and that's how people would get from floor to floor if they didn't take the elevators. But
Right.
each resort had a theme, and they would have these giant icons. Or yeah, and what was I going to tell you about that? It was very popular with the competition people that would come. The cheerleading competition, it's a national competition that would come each year.
Right,
And
yeah. My daughter actually was there for that, a
oh,
couple
was
years
she?
ago. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. They it was always fun because they'd be out practicing in the yard, and they're so good. They're so precision, right on. But Uh, and did I happen to mention when we were just about to open that resort, some guy cut himself really bad and
Oh, no.
splattered blood on the ceiling?
Oh, goodness.
We had the inspection that was happening that day, and so, as a resort manager, this is when I was in resorts. I walked through and I wanted to look at each room to make sure that with this inspection that everything was perfect. I walked into one room and just looking around, something caught my eye, and it's this big trail of blood splatter up on the ceiling.
Oh,
And I, quickly, had people investigate for me and found out that one of the workers had cut his finger quite bad and was doing
oh,
this number. So I called for some of the office people to bring me a whiteout as soon as possible, and a ladder. And they did bring it, and I took that little whiteout that you correct typing mistakes with. I
yeah.
just would unscrew that and dip it in, and I just went over all those blood spots and made it
Oh,
white again. And I'm sure that they're still there. They're just covered up.
Disney magic.
At that same resort, I received a call for a possible dead body, and
Okay, so just warning for anybody who doesn't wanna hear unaliving details. Go ahead.
so I responded, and I had a master key to. I had the keys to the kingdom. I had a master key to everything, and all the resort rooms. And I knocked and knocked, and I could smell it wafting out from this
Oh,
room. And I'm
mm.
like, oh crud, my mind was going everywhere, thinking it's not who's dead in there, it's how many are.
Ooh.
And I knocked on the door and nothing, so I opened it up, and I almost needed an oxygen tank to breathe because the smell was
Oh,
so strong of this rot. And I started looking around and looked under the bed, and there I saw a suitcase that looked like it
ooh.
was bulging. And I put some gloves on, and I reached underneath, and I called for the sheriff's office to respond off property to respond, and the homicide unit. And I took my gloves and I pulled this suitcase out, and I waited until they got there, and then we reached over and we slowly unzipped that suitcase and opened it up, and there in front of us were like 8 bottles of Asian kimchi, and one of them had broken open, I guess when they threw it under the bed, and it smelled
Oh my goodness.
horrible.
But
We
what
all,
a relief.
oh yeah, it's like whoo.
Oh, goodness. Oh,
Because
wow.
these people would get a hotel room and then they'd go on a Disney cruise. And the
Okay,
hotel room, they'd rent it even while they were gone. And when they got back, they'd still have all their stuff that they didn't want to take on the cruise in the room. And that was the case with this. That
goodness.
yeah. So that was a fun experience.
Yeah, yeah, that seems crazy. Well, I wanna share my screen with you because I'm going to ask you about one of my favorite Disney mysteries that is recent, actually, and I don't know if you know about Tally the Elf. Have you ever heard of Tally the Elf?
Tally the elf must be new. I'm sorry. I wish I could
That's
tell you.
okay. That's okay. So, this is something that popped up on my TikTok feed over the holidays, and admittedly, I'm not a huge TikToker. Just I have about 1,000 followers, and I don't post very often, but it seemed like every time I was opening my phone from the beginning of November, I was seeing these videos of Tally the Elf, and it was just addictive, and I can't explain why, but I'm gonna play one for you so that you can see what I'm talking about. This is
I'd
Tally
love
the
to see
Elf.
it.
Yes, Tally the Elf. Oh, I have to turn on the volume here.
Jason! Jason! That's a good name. But it's a naughty name! What's your name? Jessica? Naughty! Jessica! You should be ashamed, Jessica. Jessica.
I just think he's
What's
so
your name?
fun.
That is fun.
Bob?
I wonder how many there are.
Mr. Bear, we're looking for Bob. Naughty! Bob.
They
I expected more, Bob. Get it together, Bob. What's your name?
These all look like the same guy to me, so there must be more than one, but these are all the same guy, I think.
yeah,
Naughty! Priya! Yes. You're not fooling anybody with those. You need to get it together. What's your name? Claudia. Claudia. Of course. Nice. 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 What's your name? Ashley. Ashley? Yeah. Naughty! Ashley! Ashley! We were rooting for you, Ashley! You're like, I'm gonna help you out, okay? You don't tell Santa. You don't tell Santa, Ashley. What? You keep it down. You keep it down right there. All right, Ashley.
Anyway, I could watch this guy. I mean, this goes on for another couple of minutes here. I could watch him all day. I think he's hilarious. But the tea is people love Tally, and they would go specifically to video him during the parades. And
yeah.
then people started to want to know more about Tally, and they started to ruin the Disney magic, and they went and found out who he actually was, and they found his social media, and then apparently he got reassigned because I guess Disney did not like the fact that he was personally getting some notoriety for his character. I don't know if you had anything like that happen or if you know anything, that you could shed some light on this situation for us, but I'm just heartbroken that Tally may not be an elf anymore.
Yeah, well, it would take one phone call for me to find out everything about Tally,
Okay.
um, because the president of Walt Disney World was the gentleman that I found his wallet in the lake
Oh,
that I
yeah.
told you about. So
Mhm.
yeah, he's very gracious, and there's any questions I can certainly call and find out. Uh, the characters, it's really interesting because even though you see Tally's face and hair and everything, I would venture to guess, like they do with all of them, like Mary Poppins and the princesses, there's always, just like at the nursery, there's replacements. There's
Right.
always replacements that are going to come in and you would swear they were the same person. Um,
Yeah.
the in costume characters, uh, all they have to do is have the certain body type and height and learn, there's no voices that they have to do. But the uncostumed characters, yeah, they always have a backup in case, Mary Poppins falls and hurts herself.
Right. Right. Yeah, and you talked a little bit in our last interview about how, there was never more than 1 Mickey out at the same time, so there's only 1 Mickey in the whole park, and, there are several people playing the same characters, and I love that part of the Disney magic is that when you're playing a character, you have to wear the exact costume, you have to sign your name exactly the way that character signs their name. I love the
Exactly.
attention to detail that they've done in that. So, since sorry, go ahead. Were you gonna say
When
something?
Mickey and Minnie would have their show at Mickey's Playhouse, um, that was a real popular show and people would crowd in. And the minute that show started, every other Mickey had to be gone and out of the park
In the
because
tunnels, right?
yeah, well they go right down into the tunnels. They don't want anybody seeing another Mickey knowing that the Mickey's Playhouse show was going.
Right.
They are masters with the magic. And they never cease to amaze me even now. They're always the front runners of robotics and technical illusions. They are so good at, like, if you look at the Disney studios down Hollywood Boulevard, it looks so long. And you know how when you're looking down a real street, the buildings get smaller as because they're further away,
Yeah.
and they're able to force that perspective on so many of their attractions that it looks way longer than it is because things get smaller and smaller. And if
Yeah.
someone is playing a role where, they have to be big and huge, then everything around them they make sure is smaller.
Mm.
They're just masters at, you know, at I don't want to say deceit, masters at illusions.
Illusion,
Yeah,
magic, right? Yeah,
right.
so if I were going to play a taller character, they would have to make sure everything around me was very, very small.
Yep. Yeah. It's forced perspective.
Yeah. Yeah, so I think I mentioned in our last episode, I've always wanted to play, the bad ones, the bad queens, the evil person or whatever, and they would never cast me as that. I think it would be so fun to be the evil queen from Cinderella. The first time I went to Disneyland as an adult and not as a child, was the first time that I realized that right across from, I think it's the Peter Pan ride, if you look up in the building, there's a window and the evil queen is in the window and the curtains open and you see her sort of look around and then the curtains close. And that was the first time I'd seen that. And I didn't notice this until I was an adult. But sometimes the evil queen would come around and talk to the people in the lines. And she was very condescending. She was very high and mighty, had her nose in the air,
Yeah.
refused to sign autographs unless you absolutely begged her. And then I didn't notice this, but when she was around walking in the crowd, those curtains always stayed closed. When she wasn't around, the curtains would open periodically, but when she was
Yeah.
down in the audience, they made sure to keep those curtains closed. I thought that was so cool.
Yep. Same principle with, the Mickeys and the different characters.
Yeah.
Yeah, you would make a great Cruella de Vil,
Oh. Oh, thank you. I don't think I'm
you know?
quite skinny enough to be Cruella de Vil, but I do drive like a mad person.
Do you have any Dalmatians by any chance?
I have no Dalmatians. I have a couple of dogs that are velociraptors, but they're not spotted. Their coats would not would not make a good fur coat, so they're safe.
I was I never spoke to the characters. Um, that's a huge no-no. No
Oh,
employees,
okay.
you'll never see an employee communicating with a character. They do have people that watch over them. Like
Mm.
if some ding dong wants to come up and try ripping a part of the costume off of them or her, um, they have someone that will intervene right away.
So they have
I
people maybe
I
at a distance that you can't really detect that are always watching the characters.
Sure, they're
Yeah.
hostesses, and actually you can detect them. They're in the
Okay.
ambassador outfits. Uh, I I was offered something that I wish I would have accepted, and I regret it to this day. But the character manager who manages all Disney characters called me up and asked if I'd like to go on a cruise, and I'm welcome to take that cruise anytime I want. All I need to do is watch over those characters like 3 different times throughout the day.
Hmm.
And I didn't do it. I mean, I had the opportunity several times, but it's like, you know, I don't know. I can't even tell you why I didn't do it because I should have. With my attitude about life now, I definitely would do it. But
Yeah.
yeah, they always have someone watching over them. You don't want to ever have to speak to them backstage all the time, but once they're on stage, you don't ever want to compel them to have to speak back to you. Everything is hand
Oh.
signals. Everything is, you
Oh,
know,
okay.
come here, but they never speak. So it's interesting. It's just part of that illusion, that Disney magic.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's amazing. I love that. Um, so if I ever wanted to actually be a character, I mean, since you have some ins over there at the Disney Corporation, I could just, you could set me up with one of those 25 interviews you had to go through.
You wouldn't have to pass through that many interviews for being a character. That was because would be going into upper management. But uh,
Okay.
yeah, if you ever want to be a character, I've got the connections to do that for sure. And it just takes having the right personality. And if they're going to hire you as Cruella de Vil, then you're going to want to act like a real Cruella type of a person when you're
Yes,
being interviewed.
I'd have to wear my fur coat and talk about the puppies, and where's my cigarette? I think I'm a
Yeah.
little too old to start a journey as a character at this point in my life, but it sounds like fun.
Well, how old do you think Cruella is?
Well, that's a good question, I guess. I guess I don't really know how old Cruella is.
Well, she's exactly your age.
Oh. Do you know how old I am?
Yeah, I know everything about you. I was an investigator, so.
Oh, okay, so you looked me up and you're still here, which is amazing.
Well,
You know all my secrets and you decided to show up anyway.
they're all out. I'll put them on Facebook or something.
Well, the funny thing is, I guess I probably don't really have very many secrets because I spend a lot of my life talking about my entire life right here on YouTube. And I actually have I do some one-on-one coaching. One of my coaching clients, the very first meeting that I had with her, she said, "Well, I feel like I know you already because you tell way too much information about your life online."
I wanted to share this mystery that I have. You had one about Tally.
Yes.
My mystery is this. I was walking in the sports resort. I was, I don't know where I was going, what I was doing, but I was walking, trying to check on something. And all of a sudden, something yellow came flying down in front of me and hit the ground. And I looked at it, and it was, when you take a flight, there's always the flight attendant that will go over the instructions, and they have that life vest, and
Yeah.
they put it on and they pretend like you pull the cord and everything.
Yeah.
It was one of those, but
Okay.
there was nowhere for it to have come from. I mean, unless someone was on top of a building or something and then just threw it, but that makes no sense at all. That's my little mystery.
Hmm.
And I have to tell you this one experience I had at the Disney cafeteria. We used to, eat at the cafeteria. Eat, no matter where you are in management, you eat with the people that are hourly, and it doesn't matter. They don't segregate. Oh, you're important or you're high up, so you eat here. We'd all
Everyone's
eat in
a
the
cast
same
member,
place.
right?
Everyone's a cast member, exactly. Right up to Michael Eisner, at the time, whoever it is now. Well, it's my friend George Calagridis now. He's not over all of Walt Disney, but he's over the Walt Disney World. Anyway, um, I entered the cafeteria and I had my suit and tie on, and people know who we are as investigators. Um, when we're dressed like that, and they look for the little earpiece secret thing that comes down into our clothes.
Mhm.
And I was an investigator at the time, and I was at one of the resorts, and I went to lunch and I got my tray, and I had my plate of food and my drink and a straw sticking out. And as I'm waiting in line to pay, um, I bent over to take a drink from the straw, and someone called my name. So I looked up as I'm bending down, and instead of going in my mouth, the straw went straight up my nose. And I have this tray in both hands, and I lowered the tray, but the straw stayed. And I could do absolutely nothing about it except hurry and find a place to set the tray down as this straw is swinging out of my nose. And everybody saw. It was so embarrassing. But
Well, I can tell you it was probably mortifying for you, but probably the people around you just had a good chuckle and didn't think much of it.
oh, they had a good chuckle. Yeah, absolutely.
That was probably the story that they told that day.
We had a guest at one of at the sports resort. This was when I was a manager of resorts, and we always have cash dispensers, ATMs, kind of nonchalant, kind of blended in, but we always have those so that if guests need cash, they can get it. And some guest was in front of me, and I needed to get some cash because I wanted to go to the cafeteria. And I didn't have much money in my account. I wasn't, I had 4 kids and paying for rent, and I didn't have a whole lot of money. But this guest in front of me tried to get some cash out, and she kept trying. And she turned around. I was, in a suit and tie with my name tag. She goes, "This isn't working." And I said, "Oh, shoot, really?" Because I was going to get some money out of it. And she walked away. Well, there was a button there that says continue. And so I said, if, yeah. So I hit continue and put in, I don't know, I think I was trying to get $200, and it came out. But then I realized it wasn't my $200. That was from the guest. That was because now I know, I didn't know at the time, but when it says continue, it means continue with that person and that card. You're muted, can't hear you.
Oh, sorry, yeah, with the past transaction, continue with the past transaction or whatever
Yeah.
transaction was already there, yeah.
And there's 2 temptations I ever had at Disney. I was in need of cash, and I had that, and I thought I could use this and then just pay the 200 back, tomorrow. I wouldn't dare do that, but it crossed my mind.
Yeah.
What I did is went to the front desk and I said, "Here's the lady, or here's the money from the lady that was trying to get in, and she's going to call and complain that the ATM didn't work, and you'll know that this is her cash." And she actually did go to the front desk, and fortunately I had taken the money and told them to give it to her to redeposit. It was a
Yeah.
total accident. Second temptation I had, I was with Tommy Mottola, who was the head of Sony Music, and he makes everybody a star, from Barbara Streisand to Mariah Carey, Michael Jackson, all of these people. Tommy Mottola, all the celebrities would like to get to him,
Mhm.
so I was supposed to watch over him. He brought his fiancee, Mariah Carey, and I think we talked about it last time, that I'd
Yeah.
take him swimming every night while he'd get a massage. And he said to me, "Randy, don't ever worry about me because no one knows who I am. Just watch over Mariah." So they'd go out, for the day, and I'd be with them. I was always there, and I would have to play interference with, for Mariah. On their last day, he called me over and he says, "Hey, thank you so much." And he went to shake my hand, and I felt this bulge. And maybe I told you this, in his hand, and I pulled it away. I don't know how many $100 bills were in my hand, but it was a lot. And I said, "Oh, Tommy, that's so kind, sweet. Thank you." And I went to shake his hand and I gave it back to him. I said, "I can't
Mm,
take that." He said, "What do you mean you
yeah.
can't take it?" He said, "This is just a tip." I said, "Well, first of all, I can't take tips. And second of all, it's completely against the rules." And he said, "Michael Eisner is one of my best friends. So I'll tell him that you were great and I tipped you." And I said, "I especially can't do that. Don't tell him, don't tell him anything.
Yeah.
But I needed that money so bad, but I just
Mm,
couldn't take it. So
yeah.
instead, and if I'm repetitive, I'm sorry, but he asked for my address and I gave it to him and he sent me this box just packed full of all of the greatest hit CDs at the time.
Mm,
The collector's versions where you'd open them up and like Michael Jackson's, you'd open that up and the Thriller scene would pop up, the cardboard pop out things and all
the
those
big
collector
box
CDs.
sets.
It was a huge box and just full of all these artist CDs. And yeah, I could take that.
That's amazing. No, that wasn't a repetition at all. You hadn't shared that before. That's amazing. So cool. Well, you've
Yeah,
been so generous with your time, Randy. I just love talking with you. I could probably keep talking for hours and hours.
as
But
could I.
I am gonna let you go, but I am gonna have you back. I definitely want to have you back. There's so many different topics that we can talk about. Just thank you so much for your generosity, for sharing everything. And I think next time you come back, I'd love for you to talk about your book, Filling Empty, and your experiences in the funeral care industry.
That would be an honor to come back, Megan. I'm very appreciative of you having me on the show. And, I have found a community within this group of so many people that you and I know. And it's such a pleasure to be able to be on these podcasts and share some experiences. So thank you very much.
Yeah, well, I love having you here. You've just been a delight to talk with. You're a beautiful human being. Thank you to our audience for being here. Thank you to everyone who sent in questions for me. And if you keep putting questions in the comments, those of you who are watching after the fact on the replay crew, I will do my very best to get your questions to Randy and see if we can get them answered in the comments or have him back again for another deep dive into Disney secrets. Until then, everyone, please take good care of your people, but most of all, take good care of yourself and have a lovely evening.